Welcome to the Dream Journal. From the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, the Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the power of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with listeners like you. A dream can be meaningful even if you don't know what it means. Do you need an expert to tell you what your dream means? The answer, in my opinion, is definitely no. Today's guest is Toko-Pa Turner, a woman who spent a decade at the Young Foundation of Ontario before realizing, thanks to a dream, that she had to go her own way to get to the heart of what is truly important in life. Today marks the 300th published episode of the Dream Journal and podcast. I'm not in the studio this week since I'm down at Whittier for the IASD Regional Conference, but I wanted to mark this occasion with a very special interview. So I am thrilled to be hosting the remarkable dream goddess Toko-Pa Turner. I've been scheming about how to get her on the show for some time now, and we finally hit upon doing a pre-recorded interview, which is what you are hearing today. So I'm sorry, no call-ins. However, feel free to email me with any feedback or questions, and I'm always, of course, open to encouragement. But stay tuned to listen to my conversation with Toko-Pa Turner and what is sure to be an insight-packed episode of the Dream Journal. I am your host, Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. I'm going to start with a snippet of a dream I had recently, which I am driving in the dark, and the snowstorm, a blizzard comes down, and I just keep driving. And inside the car, there's snow is heaped up on the dashboard. It's all around in the passenger seat, but there's somebody sitting there. And I say, please help me clear the car. And they start scooping handfuls of snow out of the car. And there's just something about this blizzard of my life that my life has become, which I can keep going and I get help. So it's just this is an amazing dream of just being with the blizzard, keep going, asking for help. And yeah, I'm just glad to share that with you because this is very unusual for me to do a pre-recorded show. And so I'm a little, oh. So let me say hello, Toko-Pa Turner. So glad to have you on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Catherine, and congratulations on 300 episodes. That's a huge accomplishment. What a commitment.
Yeah, it's really a big part of my life. Every single week is part of my life, and it both keeps me young and gives me gray hairs, is what I like to say about that. It's one of those things in
I
life.
know that well.
Yes, I know. Yeah, this. So let me read a bio. This is a little to introduce our guest here. Toko-Pa Turner is a Canadian author and an internationally celebrated dream worker. Her first book, Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home, has been translated into 10 languages and won awards in 2017 and 2018. Her new book, The Dreaming Way, Courting the Wisdom of Dreams, has been called remarkable by mythologist Michael Meade and exquisitely written by Jungian analyst Anne Baring. Tokopa's website is tokopa.com. That's Toko hyphen PA, tokopa.com. And you can find her Instagram at Toko-Pa and Facebook at Toko-Pa Turner. So, Toko-Pa, I am just delighted to have you on the show.
I'm so happy to be here in your cohort of dreamers. Thanks for
Excellent.
having me.
Totally. So, I was, I'd heard about your work for a long time from many folks, and I finally really got into it, reading the book about called Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home. And this book is just this beautiful ode to the longing for belonging that so many of us feel. And it's not specifically about dreams, but there is some dreams in there. And but this new book is called The Dreaming Way, Courting the Wisdom of Dreams is just all about dreams. It's this rich cornucopia of the mystic prose and as well as detailed nitty-gritty instructions.
Yeah, I tried to take a sort of combination of, I wanted it to be practical so that people could, have tools with which to approach their own dreams, but also I felt important to talk about my philosophical approach to working with dreams as well, because I think, dreams serve us as individuals, but also I think they shape us, and they shape us in a way that is in service to a larger intelligence. So I liked sort of taking this meandering path to look at some of that those depth ideas, as well as making it practical so people feel like, that they could work with their own dreams without an expert, like you said in your intro.
Right, right. Because there's something about that you spent a long time in this community on the school, the Jungian Foundation, and really thought that would be like the core of how you were going to work with dreams, and yet you have left that organization and you have found your own way. Wonder if you want to talk to me about maybe a dream or two along the way. What's been pivotal to you?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I didn't attend analyst training, so I wasn't on the school path. But I worked there in a kind of internship capacity. But I also attended as a public member of the
Mhm.
foundation and ended up attending a lot of the workshops and have a great passion for Jungian psychology, the Jungian approach to dream work. But I did receive a dream that I talk about in the Dreaming Way, that was in the midst of a weekend workshop that I was taking at the Young Foundation with a visiting analyst. And the dream was that there was a witch, and she was an ancient witch. And the people of the Young Foundation were building a platform on her grave.
Mm.
And um, it had stirred her awake after this hundreds year slumber, and she was angry about it. And she began to wake up and she destroyed this platform, and she flew into a rage that ended up being this bloody massacre. And when I woke up from that dream, my heart was pounding, I was sweating. It was really, really scary and violent. And it took me a few days, as big dreams like that sometimes do, to just sort of recover from the impact of that imagery, that violence, that intensity. And I sat with this dream for a long time, and eventually, and much in retrospect, also, I realized that this dream seemed to be saying that there was a far more ancient feminine way that had been left for dead, upon which a more academic platform perhaps was being built. And I had felt that intuitively in relationship to Jungian dream work, that there was a kind of a lexicon, there was a powerful academic body of work that Jung himself left behind, and many have contributed to, much of which is incredibly valuable. But I also found that there were limitations to me personally, because I knew I would never be on the inside of this exclusive group, but
Mhm.
also to all of the people in the world who are having dreams and who maybe, can't afford to see a Jungian analyst, or can't afford to take a training to become an analyst themselves, or who maybe just want to have a more direct and intimate relationship with their dreams. And so this really put me on a path that in many ways I had already been on, but it sort of solidified a desire to discover what I now think of as a kind of animist approach to dream work, which is the reason why I use that word is because, indigenous cultures all around the world, as a matter of course, have always centered their dreams as part of culture making and it doesn't matter which continent you're on, which era you are speaking about, but the first peoples, the oldest peoples and some which still exist on this planet, have always listened to their dreams, shared their dreams, and taught the way of understanding the language of dreams. And so it's really just in our culture, I think, in modernity, that we think that we need this sort of rationalistic approach to dream work, where there has to be a sort of a middleman or an expert or someone who can tell us what our dreams mean. And so my goal with my life really has been to try and bring dreaming back to the people, at least to be one of the many people who are doing that work of bringing dreaming back to the people.
Oh, that's beautiful. Right. Thank you. I mean, there's something that I love about that, that the dream is for the dreamer, and that the dreamer themselves needs to be integrally involved in any work and any understanding of symbols or images or even feelings, and that there's something incredibly valuable about that. Totally resonates with me. And one of the things I really love about your approach is that you really talk about dreams and the imagination as they are reality. It's not just, oh, it was just a dream. It's in my imagination, that you talk that this is real.
Mm.
Would
Yeah,
you like
I
to say
think
more about that?
yeah, for sure. Well, I was raised in a sort of unusual way where I was raised with Sufism. I was raised in a Sufi community at a young age, and the Sufi understanding of the imagination is very, very different from how we think about it um, in psychology and in Western culture. We think of the imagination as housed within the scaffolding of our craniums, within our brains, right?
Right.
And that everything that a dream produces is about our psychology, and that it's really it ends at the limits of our physical body, or perhaps maybe just a little broader than that into our personal sphere, whatever that looks like. But in the Sufi perspective, imagination is a place. And so the Sufis have a different concept of reality, that it isn't just this physical reality that we are used to thinking about as reality, but they actually believe in a threefold cosmos. And so those three realms are the divine realm, which is inaccessible to us because we are in bodies. There is the physical realm, which we're very familiar with, but there is an in-between realm, which is the imaginal realm. And the imaginal space is a kind of place of exchange between the divine and the corporeal. And so when we dream, we are entering a realm full of beings and wisdom and information, which is so much larger than our physical body. It actually draws upon deep wells of wisdom and um, um, the kind of appendix of our entire species exists in that realm. So psyche then becomes maybe just a node in a network, is like how I like to think of it. Psyche is just, say, perhaps our particular entry point into this larger eco-psyche, which is the word that I play with in this book. And eco-psyche is this, realm of interconnected psyche, which transcends physical space and also time. So I know that's a lot, but the idea is really just that we are all connected,
Mhm.
and what Jung would have referred to as the collective unconscious, but belongs not just to our species, but to all living beings, to nature at large.
Mm.
And so my feeling is that when we're dreaming about something, yes, there is information and wisdom there for our personal development and growth and realization and actualization. There's a wholeness into which we are becoming, but also that wholeness fits kind of holographically into a larger wholeness, is attempting to come into harmony together.
So I like how you talk about uh like the community, like that the collective, and that the dreams speak to that collective, because I think you're right that even in the Dreamwork circles where we don't think we need a shaman to tell us what the dream means, that we still often think it's mostly about me. And there's definitely layers that are about our individually, and those are super important because we often have blocks and gifts that are unique that the dreams can really highlight. And yet sometimes there's these layers of cultural meaning to dreams that um, I, for one, often forget to look for. So I wonder, do you want to give an example of something like that, or do you have more you want to say about that?
Well, I think one of the most amazing things that happens is when we come together in dream sharing circles, it becomes very obvious very quickly that we are literally an ecosystem working things out together. And so a good example I would use is, say, a group of people who have never been in contact with each other. I often host retreats and workshops and things like that. And so these people might come from different corners of the world and come to spend time together in dreaming community. And we'll find after just one night's sleep, when we come together and share our dreams in a dreaming sharing circle, we'll notice that there are themes that emerge in that particular circle. And this is kind of amazing when you think about it, because there would be no reason for us to share stories or to have any historical information shared between us. And yet, certain images might repeat throughout the dreams as if we are one being coming together to work out a larger problem. And so, yes, I do think we have these personal missions that we could call purpose, that we are attempting to come into alignment with. But also, I think it's very important for us to be sharing dreams at the level of community and of family, because that's when we begin to have a broader leverage in that when there are many of us working on a single or particular issue, we have a much higher chance of resolving it together because we're building a momentum in a group. So,
Hmm. Right, right. And there's something about that I love is because, a part of me goes like, oh, eek, now I gotta like figure out the way forward. But, I think the dreams are already helping us move forward. The dreams themselves are moving forward. And you have this phrase that I love, which is called the magic of not knowing. Like there's something valuable about knowing. Like I have this catchphrase I say, a dream can be meaningful even if you don't know what it means. But this goes like beyond that. So it's the magic of not knowing, is actually, it's not just okay to not know, but it's actually magic. It's
yeah.
valuable to not know.
Yeah, it's actually prerequisite
Uh-huh.
because it's only in that not knowing when you're working with a dream that you have a chance at being led somewhere new. It's only in coming into a dream with not knowing that you have a chance at being surprised, at coming into contact with something that is an edge for you or surprising for you in some way. So, if we go into a dream, sometimes with too much knowledge, with too many preconceived ideas about what we think an image means or what a symbol should be equated to, how it should be defined, we often miss what really wants to be discovered in the dream. And dreams rarely give us something that we already know. So even when something appears familiar, like a familiar pattern, it's important to look at the surrounding details that might be different, that might be new, in order to see which way the topic at hand might be evolving in present time for you.
Because recurring dreams are rarely ever exactly the same. I mean, it's kind of an emergency if they are exactly the same. Maybe it's like in severe cases of PTSD, the dream might be replaying the traumatic event over and over again, in which case that's like a big red flag, big emergency. But most dreams, most themes repeat with differences, and we can start to see how things evolve. Like I have a whole series of nightmares about giving my podcast. And I share these dreams very often on the show that I have these intense dreams where I show up at the studio and things aren't going well and the table collapses or something. But they're but there's differences, and each like one time I had a little boy come and sit on my leg. So even though everything was falling apart around me, there was this little boy, and I was connecting with a little boy, and I could feel that connection, and I could just let the rest fade away. So this is a valuable theme for me, but the details as they're different is really helpful.
I think the same wisdom is true for a dream worker, for somebody who helps people with their dreams. There's something very magical about um, really being as present and embodied as possible when listening to someone else's dream instead of going into perhaps a body of knowledge or a system of symbols or whatever it may be, which can cloud and project upon a dream. But I think there's a beautiful teaching in that from dream work that teaches us how to be with other people in general. That has nothing to do with dream work, that it teaches us a kind of beginner's mind, a
Mm.
kind of showing up in as innocent a way as possible to meet somebody where they are in this moment and to be receptive to that growing edge that they are standing on or working on.
hmm I always like to remember that most of the dreams that any of us ever have, we don't remember. Like that, even if we were writing down like several dreams a night, that we have more than that. And so there's something nourishing about the dream itself, even if we don't remember. And most animals, as far as we know, don't remember their dreams. And so there's something very valuable in the dream itself. It doesn't need interpretation. I would say it benefits. I think you agree that it benefits by sharing and speaking out loud or journaling, all these practices we do, but it doesn't need that. And so there's something just calming about that for me because, I sometimes will go through a dream drought where I can't remember anything for 2 weeks. And I'm like, well, I guess the dreams are doing their magic without me right now. But I can, it kind of soothes me to remind myself that they have this evolutionary purpose, which is way beyond the little bit of consciousness that I might have.
Mm.
Yeah. So, this is kind of along the lines of like I actually want to touch on the symbols. You were talking about the idea of symbols and working with symbols, and how that can sometimes take us out of the depth of a dream. Sometimes they can be valuable, but sometimes I think it's both true, and I think you would agree with that there can be a value in looking up symbols and things. But I would say that's not the first thing to do with a dream, that there can be some value in looking up symbols. And one thing I appreciate about your book is you talk a lot about archetypes, and you talk about some of the things that we all have in common, some of these kind of images and the kind of issues like mother issues and am I worthy, and that these things that we really all have in common, and yet each of us feels these things in our own particular way. And so there's like the idea of the symbol being a kind of a general idea of what something might represent in a dream, and then there's the particularity of how it shows up for the individual dreamer.
Yeah, I find working with dreams, it's good to work on both of those levels, or and even a third level, which might be the sort of collective or ancestral level as well. It's good to tend to each of those if you have time for it. So looking at, like you said, the particularity of why you are having this dream at this moment in time, but also how might those symbols be considered in a larger universal context? Like, for instance, you might dream of eating an apple and then feeling like you have a sour belly, and wanting to spit it up. I mean, the poisoned apple image is for sure something we have seen in archetypal imagery and fairy tales, and so that might add richness to your dream work process by, exploring that particular fairy tale or story. And then you could also consider your dream on that ancestral and or collective level as well, looking at the particular piece, the universal piece, and then looking at what's happening in the culture around you. Because if we are one organism, if we are an eco psyche, then certainly what is happening at the level of, let's say the political sphere or the world stage is going to have to be worked out also at the personal and vice versa. So, so yeah, if you do have the time to look at each of those levels, it can be really, really rich.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. And I find that dreams, even that have been with me for years, can be still valuable to return to, especially if they come up for me. Like I had a childhood dream that came up for me a couple of years ago, and it's just somehow felt very present. And I got a tremendous value in going back into that dream and really reframing it. And I looked at the same dream over the years a few times, and this time it just kind of put the whole different context into that dream. And I think that can be good to revisit these dreams over time.
Mhm. Yeah, I find that sort of remarkable that given a bit of space and time, that a dream can bring about a whole different set of revelations for you based on how you have changed since the last time you dreamed it. But I'm sort of the same way. I believe that if a dream still has juice, if it still has potency, if it's still kind of coming to your mind and you're associating to it, if it's coming up, then there's probably something still there to be explored or to be explored newly.
Hmm. Right, absolutely. Okay, so we're almost ready to take our break, but I just want to give a little preview that one thing I'd love to talk more about in the second half, since we won't be having any callers today. I want to talk a little about the shadow and how working with shadow in dreams, and then because we usually do call-ins, I'm wondering if maybe if you'd like to do a little dream work with me. Well, we'll see how it goes. So this is the Dream Journal. You're listening to KSQD Studios in Santa Cruz. We are also co-broadcast live in San Jose by KCXU. My guest today is the fabulous Toko-Pa Turner. You can get in touch with her at tokopa.com, Toko dash pa dot com. And after the break, we will have much more to talk about. So we will be right back. Okay, welcome back. You are listening to the Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and I'm really glad to have you on the show. I wanted to say that people from all over the world are interested in their dreams, and I'd like to encourage you to nudge the algorithm to spread interest in dreaming. And please follow the Dream Journal on your favorite podcast app. And if you're inspired, leave a rating and review. That really helps to spread interest in dreaming. But really, most importantly, is has nothing to do with the internet, which is I encourage you to talk to your friends about your dreams or your family, your loved ones, because there's something so valuable about that. And you might discover certain people in your life are interested in dreams and you just didn't know that. They were waiting for somebody else to bring up the topic. So part of the mission of this podcast is to get people talking about dreams. And so I encourage you to do that. Also, please contact me if you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about a new book or to let folks know about your dream-related offerings. Or if you're an individual with a deep relationship with your dreams, I would love to talk about individuals' dreamers' journeys on the podcast. So give me a call and let me know if you'd like to be on the show. You can go to Facebook and Instagram to find out about upcoming shows and pod drops by following hashtag the Dream Journal and at Experiential Dreamwork. So next week, the Dream Journal host, Dr. Apala Colorado, author of Woman Between the Worlds, a Native American shaman. She will talk to us about how Indigenous wisdom resonates with modern life while lovingly teaching us how to honor its power, beauty, and potential. So I'm excited about welcoming Dr. Colorado next week on the show. So today's guest is Toko-Pa Turner, and I'm so delighted to have you on the show.
So happy to be back with you.
That's great. You can find out about Toko-Pa at toko-pa.com, Toko dot dash pa.com, tokopod.com. And we've been talking about her new book, which is called The Dreaming Way. And, the Courting the Wisdom of Dreams is the subtitle of the book. And that is really a key part of your dream approach, Toko-Pa, is the courting, the idea of courting and doing things slowly. So tell me about courtship. What is courtship of dreams all about?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you know, I we always think of this word courtship as kind of an old-timey word, something that used to happen before, maybe our grandparents' age. And courtship was this idea that you would not directly approach the person of your affection, but you might circle them in a respectful way and slowly gain their trust and determine what it is that they love. And perhaps even with your generosity, find a way to give that to them. And I love this idea, even though it's not at all how we treat relationship in modern times. But I think it's a perfect metaphor for working with our dreams. And, I've been working with dreams for a couple of decades. And what I have found is that this slow, sort of respectful approach is the most nourishing for people. And it's this idea that we have to gain the trust of the dream so that it will sort of open up its depths to us and reveal what it has to say to us. And so rather than trying to analyze or pick apart or figure out or get to a bottom line, this is what I would call the acquisitional approach to dream work, where we're trying to get something from the dream, right?
Mhm,
Instead of that, courtship is the idea that we're trying to figure out what the dream wants, what the
mhm,
dream loves, and see if we can move our lives in such a way that it provides that longing to the dream. And
mhm,
so I wanted to come up with really simple tools that people could use to do this courtship process. And so I came up with these very simple tools that include sort of a very embodied approach to listening to the dream, and then focusing on curiosity, really just asking questions. What did you think about this? How did you feel in this moment? Tell me what you saw through your eyes. What was the part that intrigued you the most? Where was the concentration of the most energy? Does this remind you of anything? Those kinds of questions where we really get into the nitty-gritty of what happened in the dream story. And through this questioning process, you can imagine the dream goes from being a small little tight bundle to being a large sort of blossoming creature now at this point with all of these new ideas that have come out of the curiosity process. And then what we have to do is synthesize what we've learned to try to make connections um, from from the dream back to waking life, bridging what we've learned from the dream to things that might be happening for us in waking life that might have a parallel to what's happening in the dream because they most often do. There usually are parallels. And once we've done that, we can kind of synthesize and come to this ultimate question of what is the longing of the dream? Because I believe every dream has a secret longing. And if we're careful and if we're respectful, we can find out what that longing is. And so I like at the end of a dream to ask that question, what do you think is the secret longing of the dream?
mhm.
And it can often then prompt us to do something because people always want to see, after they do dream work, they're like, but what should I do? And I think taking an action of some kind is incredibly important because that's how you keep the conversation going with wisdom. You receive something from the dream, and then as a form of respect, you do something in return, whether that is just a small ritual action or whether it is changing your behavior in a certain way, or whether it is taking a symbolic step in a direction that the dream is prompting you. It's really important to do something in response. And then you watch what the dreams have to say the next night. And then I sort of see this as a reciprocal process. Dream work is a conversation. And so the courtship is not just with a single dream, but it's with the imaginal realm itself. And we can deepen that conversation for the rest of our lives.
I love this. It's beautiful. It seems so relational that we're not just like say trying to get something, extract some meaning from the dream, but actually we're creating this relationship with our inner self, with our series of dreams, with that part of who we are.
Yes. And
Mhm.
maybe perhaps I would just add, not just with ourselves, but with that larger network,
Mm.
which I think of as nature, which is naturing through us. Because you see, dreams are biological, right? They are a natural process, just as natural as our heart beating, or breath moving in and out of our lungs, or circulation of our blood. So too our dreams, nature naturing through us. Somehow we go to sleep at night and these images bloom forth and are produced through us like a flowering plant. And so why shouldn't that nature be connected to a larger mission, a larger body, a larger ecosystem? So yes, being in conversation with ourselves, but also keeping in mind that there's an even larger eco-psyche, which we are just a part of. And the reason why I place emphasis on this is because I want to remind people that this isn't just navel gazing. We aren't just sort of, you know, um, analyzing ourselves and our psychology, but we're really trying to hear nature moving through us and in which direction it wants us to go for the better of everyone we come into contact with, and even those we who are on distant shores, but who are still connected through the larger eco-psyche. So there is, I think, a mutuality that is coming through our dreams that is important for all of us to pay attention to, especially in these times of, social and ecological collapse.
Right. That's so true. It's so true. And while we're talking about the relationship with these dreams and between with ourselves and with the larger nature, the eco psyche here. I also like to just touch into relationships, like personal relationships, and that I find that dreams often have a lot to say about personal relationships and how we show up, and that kind of brings me toward the question of shadow, because a lot of times the things that we don't attend to or we have trauma around go into the shadow and affect the way we are with other people. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are about working with, I guess that's kind of two things, working with the shadow, but also working with relationships. They're
Yeah, of course. Well, um, I think especially with people that we're very close to, we tend to share psyche in a more intimate way. And so as families, as communities, as friends, there are bigger projects that we're collaborating on and working on together. So certainly we dream about those relationships. And shadow, I mean, I'm sure you speak about shadow quite a bit on your show, but for listeners who maybe aren't familiar with that terminology, shadow is just a way of expressing all of those things that remain out of our conscious realization. So these are things that maybe we were taught when we were growing up that these things were less than desirable, or that we should be critical towards, or that perhaps we were taught to value certain qualities. For instance, if you were born into a house that a home that really valued academic achievement, then odds are you would try to align yourself with that ethos, and maybe you tried to become academically accomplished. But on the flip side, in the shadow, might be those things that were less valued or not acknowledged at all, like creativity, like art, like the feeling life, like dreams, like spirituality. Who knows? Every household is different, yeah. So these things that are unacknowledged, that we haven't addressed, may still be important to who we are and who we're meant to become. And so they will probably show up in our dreams. So these are all the things that we don't acknowledge, that we reject in ourselves or in others, that we are afraid of, or that we have not yet discovered, that just are out of reach so far. And so the shadow, if you can sort of imagine it, is just this huge storehouse of potential.
Mhm.
And it actually contains a great deal of gold for us. And so shadow work in that sense is incredibly important and essential to dream work. So lots of people have bad dreams, upsetting dreams, anxiety dreams. And that's really when stuff is emerging out of those, what the poet Robert Bly calls the long black bag we drag behind us.
Love that.
And so things that come out of that black bag, out of the shadow in unexpected ways, the more we push them away, the more they tend to rear up and become frightening. So they tend to emerge first in our dreams before anything else. And so, what happens when we wake up from a difficult dream is often our knee-jerk reaction is to push it as far away as possible because it's repulsive or it's scary or it's ugly, and we just want to distance ourselves from that. And that's perfectly natural, you know. Um, it's it's uh, um, it's human to just to not want to feel bad things, yeah. But I think we really have to change that knee-jerk reaction and begin to just be curious. Just be curious. And that is just the first stage, is just turning towards a difficult dream, perhaps long enough to write it down. And then just find yourself wondering about these images and why they're coming up, because there's probably something in those dreams that is ready to come to consciousness. Because when we don't acknowledge things, when we push them away, it actually takes a great deal of our energy to keep those things out of our sphere. And the image I like to think of is like a beach ball, you know, those big blow up inflatable beach balls. When you try and push them under the water, it actually requires a huge amount of strength to keep one of those things underwater. But at the latest, at the smallest slip up, boom, it'll pop out much bigger than you expected to because you've been taking so much energy to press it down.
Mhm.
So the reason why I use that analogy is because there is a lot of just pure energy that can be redeemed for other purposes when we do shadow work. And the first step is just acknowledging that if you have a bad dream, what it means is something is ready to come to consciousness. So you are ready to look at this thing, and that's why you dreamed it.
Mhm.
And so, if you can have a little bit of bravery to turn towards that image and just breathe and take it slow and remember that you're safe and that it can't hurt you, that there's something there that maybe wants to be acknowledged in a deeper way. And you know, earlier you were talking about PTSD dreams, and certainly people who have experienced profound traumas. I would always recommend that they, if they're having those level of upsetting dreams that are unmanageable for their own mental health, that they definitely have a professional, a mental health professional, be with them as they start to excavate some of that imagery, because sometimes it's just helpful to have somebody who can be a neutral presence to help you see the wisdom in why something like that may come to the surface. But to be honest, most of us have trauma. Most of us have hardship. Most of us have painful, difficult things that we have to deal with. And one of the best and safest ways to begin to explore that is through dream work and just starting to become curious and ask some questions and see if you can begin to make those connections as to why you had this dream in this moment. Did something happen the previous day that give rise to it, even if it was an internal process, or maybe it was an external trigger? Um, but that'll be the first step in helping you to reclaim some of the energy that it takes to keep those things suppressed. And what do you do with all that extra energy? Well, who knows what creative purposes you might choose to use? Who knows what new power it might imbue you with as a result of not having to hide those things from yourself and from others.
Mhm. I love that idea of the beach ball, holding the beach ball underwater. That's brilliant. That's just beautiful description of how much energy it takes to hold these things down, and also how it bursts out sometimes and can cause like all these can cause problems. But if we work with the dreams where these things show up, then it allows us a chance to kind of deflate the beach ball a little bit, or maybe find the benefit of it, or maybe let it come above the water and play with it. I mean, whatever analogy, however you want to take the analogy down the road. It's there's something about that seems really valuable. I'm wondering if you, so I like the idea of the curiosity. Um, and then you also talked about that shadow is not only negative, it isn't always bad things. A lot of times what we put into shadow is like things like creativity and art and what the things that are that you would call positive, perhaps. They're like sometimes people call that the golden shadow. Like if you dream about a rock star, like somebody on stage, then maybe there's a way that you would like to be expressing yourself musically more. So there's ways that shows up as a golden shadow, as well as these more painful kind of dark shadows. Because
Yeah,
the trick with dark shadows, the tough part for me is that I feel shame, like, oh, am I that rigid? Am I that person who, and then I feel some shame about it. And so want to bring a lot of tenderness to these kinds of dreams.
yeah, indeed. Yeah, having compassion for all your parts is one of the great strengths that I think DreamWork hones in us as we do that, is as we start to, I think early on in the DreamWork process, you can think of, oh, that's a bad person and I'm the
Right,
good person. But then when you
right.
start to think of it as an ecosystem, and that,
Mhm.
all of these parts are active within your psychic landscape, then you begin to learn how to have compassion for what you might label as a bad part. Maybe it's not that it's bad, it's just that it is maligned in some way, that it is not being given a direct expression. And so it has to sort of turn up its volume to get your attention.
Mhm.
And a lot of bad dreams are like that. Nightmares are sort of, they're just like, maybe they nudged you at first and you ignored them. And then they turned up the volume a little more and you still ignored them. And then they turn it, and then they really have to crank the volume. So you're like woken from sleep and jarred and you have, you're sweating, those kinds of dreams. It's because the volume has had to be, turned up to the point where you will pay attention. Um, and I like that you brought up the what you call the golden shadow. Um, these are those moments in dreams where, if you have a figure that is larger than life, or maybe physically taller than you, or in some way, um, you're envying them or admiring them, that too is a moment of opportunity for compassion, because you can say, well, what if also that is me? Also, that is something in me. And maybe I can take just a homeopathic dose of it and say, oh, maybe I'm a huge star, also somewhere in there.
I love that. That's fabulous. So So Toko-Pa Turner, I want to know what's next for Toko-Pa. Like, what have you been thinking about? What are you moving toward? What kind of new ideas are interesting you lately? Your book came out in the fall, I think, so that's I'm sure the publishing process was long. So, like, what have you been mulling over since then? What is new for you?
Yeah, I mean, you really called it, writing a book. Both of my books took between 4 and 5 years to write. And that's just because when I'm writing, I really like to push my own boundaries. And so it's very much a kind of immersive process where I'm wanting to find language, wanting to express things in a way that feels fresh and salient for me. And so very much like a birthing process, I imagine. After 4 or 5 years, I'm very much in the exhale at the moment. So, yeah, we're in such a chaotic time on Earth right now. I
Yes.
think probably your listeners can relate that, and you as well, Catherine. But I think we're all just really grappling with the rapid fire changes that are happening at these larger levels, and um, I think that's mainly where my focus is right now, just trying to find my own values and truth in the midst of all this craziness, and also recovering from a very big publishing process. It has really felt like releasing a butterfly into a hurricane. That's
Oh,
the image that I have right now because the
right.
world is so upside down and nuts.
Yeah.
And I wrote this very delicate book about dreams,
Right,
So
right.
I think right for the foreseeable future, I'm just going to be doing a fair bit of teaching in the next couple of years, which involves doing some things in person and doing some things online and working with various partners. And in terms of my own writing, I have a Substack these days, which is tokopa.substack.com if anybody wants to join me there. So I'm trying to put most of my energy into that space
Mhm.
and just personally focusing on poetry at the moment.
Poetry, I love it. Well, your writing is already so incredibly poetic that I could see you be a real natural for poetry. So that's exciting. So what could you like to tell listeners? You've mentioned a bunch of teaching that you'll be doing. You've mentioned retreats. So if you have something coming up now, you're welcome to share it. What do you recommend?
Yes, well, I offer these courses once or twice a year called the Dream Lodge. And the Dream Lodge is just a place where people can gather, and I teach the tools of dream courtship. And then we do live dream work as a group together. So people can watch the process unfold and also contribute to it. So the best way to stay in touch with when I'm offering those kinds of courses online is to sign up for my mailing list. And you can do that on my website. And then anytime anything's happening, I'll send you an email about it, which I just so you know, I'm not one of these people who emails a lot. I probably should email more than I do. Um, but it's a good way to stay in touch with what I'm doing.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Toko. This has been an amazing conversation. And I wondered, there's a little space here. I wondered, did you have any last minute encouragements or well, how would you like to end the show?
Yeah, well, I was so glad that you brought up imagination before because I think more than any other thing, reclaiming imaginal space is perhaps the most um, rebellious and powerful and urgent things that people can be doing right now. And certainly, dream work is a huge part of that. Just waking up in the morning with the intent to remember your dreams and to write them down, that is huge. If you're doing that, that's massive. But I think we can even push that further. And I really want to urge people to think of social media as places where our imagination is being co-opted. It is a kind of outsourcing of the imaginal faculties, and it's much more dangerous than I think anybody, or not anybody, but many people realize, because this is my rant at the moment, that that these places have these very specific mechanical algorithms that are designed to funnel us into narrower and narrower ways of thinking. And so we have to reclaim that space. And it's not easy to do because they're highly addictive spaces. But if you begin to think of it as outsourcing your imagination when you go to those places, maybe it'll help to reclaim some of the gap time in your day, whether you're waiting in traffic or whether you're standing in line or just staring into space. Anytime you can use to just be in relationship with your imagination is incredibly powerful and very much needed, because what we need more than anything right now is people having original thoughts and original ideas. So that's what I'd love to leave your listeners with. And it
Really.
isn't easy. I know myself, I'm challenged to do it, but I keep renewing the effort, and maybe one day I'll have the courage to leave social media altogether. Um, but it's sort of one of our only ways of staying in touch with each other as well. So it's tricky.
Well, I appreciate their celebration of gap time, the value of just thinking with being with our own thoughts. Thank you so much. Toko-Pa Turner, this is a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. So then thank you all for listening. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, and we are live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific at ksqd.org. The podcast is released on the Monday after the show. It spreads interest in dreaming when you subscribe, rate, and review. I'm Catherine Bell. You can find out about my dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. Email me at catherine@ksqd.org. That's KATHERINE at ksqd.org. Follow Experiential Dreamwork and hashtag the Dream Journal on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to find out about upcoming shows. I'd like to thank Rick Kleffel, engineer and music creator. Intro and outro pieces are both by Mood Science. And tomorrow morning, when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.